Today we will continue with in the Greek, historiography, and Strabo is one of the stalwarts of that tradition. He was born in 64 BC at Amasia, Pontus, and died after 21 AD. So he was a Greek geographer and historian whose geography, this is the name of the book, geography is the only extant work, surviving work, covering the whole range of peoples and countries known to both Greeks and Romans during the reign of Augustus, that is 27 BC to 14 AD, and its numerous quotations from technical literature, moreover, provide a remarkable account of the state of Greek geographical science as well as of the history of the countries it surveys. Here I would like to point out that Strabo also writes about, although not much, but he does say something about India, then southern steppes of Russia and other places. So Strabo belonged to on his mother's side to a famous family whose members had held important offices under Mithridates. Fifth, whose period is 150 to 120 BC, as well as under Mithridates the Great, the opponent of Rome, 132 to 63 AD. His first teacher was the master of rhetoric, Aristodemus. He was master of rhetorics, a former tutor of the sons of Pompey, in Nyasa. And now Sultanhisar in Turkey. This place is now known as NYSA, Nysa, is now known as Sultanhisar in Turkey on the Mander, now Menendres River. He moved to Rome in 44 BC to study the Trinian and the former tutor of Cicero, with Trinian, former student of Cicero, and with Xenarchus, both of whom were members of the Aristotelian school of philosophy, under the influence of Athenodorus, former tutor of Octavius. They were all illustrious teachers who probably introduced him into the future emperor's circle. He turned towards Stoical philosophy, Stoicism, a kind of philosophical trend, the precepts of which included the view, this is one of the gist of that school, that one unique principle, this is the principle of it, one unique principle ceaselessly pervading the whole universe causes all the phenomena. So, behind all the phenomena, one single reason is involved. It was in Rome, where he stayed at least until 31st BC, that he wrote his first major work, his 47-book historical sketches, published in about 20 BC, of which but a few quotations survive. A vast and eclectic compilation, it was meant as a continuation of Polybius's histories. We have already discussed him. So, the historical sketches by Strabo covered the history of known world from 145 BC, that is from the conquest of Greece by the Romans to the battle of Actium, to the beginnings of the principles of the Roman Emperor Augustus, 27 BC. Now, in 29 BC, Strabo visited the island of Gyaros, today known as Iaros or Nissos. This is in the Aegean Sea. On his way to Corinth, Greece, where Augustus was staying, in 25 or 24 BC, together with Aelius Gallus, who was the prefect of Egypt, who had been sent to a military mission to Arabia, he sailed up the Nile as far as Philae. There are then no further references to him until 17 AD, when he attended the triumph of the Roman general Germanicus Caesar, 15 BC to 19 AD, in Rome. He died after having devoted his last years to compiling his second major work, important work, that is Geographical Sketches. Judging by date, when he wrote his personal notes, he must have worked on the book after his stay in Egypt and then have put it aside after 2nd BC to 14 AD, when he started the final edition, which he brought to an end by about say 21 AD. The first two books, Historical Sketches and Geographical Sketches, in effect provide a definition of the aims and methods of geography, what should be the aim of a geographer or method of the geographer, by criticizing earlier works on geography. We have already surveyed that, and the authors. Strabo found fault with the map designing of the Greek scholar Eratosthenes, who lived from 276 to 194 BC. Eratosthenes had combined astronomical data with coast and road measurements. He is the first who has given that, but Strabo found his work lacking in precision, despite of this merit. Although Strabo closely followed the treatise against Eratosthenes of the Greek astronomer Hipparchus, who had lived in the 2nd century BC, he blamed Hipparchus for neglecting the description of Earth. So they were, dealing with the problem of measuring the Earth. Here, about Eratosthenes, I would also like to mention that he is possibly the first who reports about how cotton was cultivated in India, since he was involved in precision sciences, mathematics and others. So he for the first time reports that in India cotton is cultivated in rows, in straight lines, which is in modern times. When I was in school, we were told that this is a Japanese invention. Here we find that no, much ahead of our present times, this was already practiced in India. So on the other hand, the Strabo appreciated Polybius, who had written, in addition to his historical works, two books on European geography that Strabo admired for their descriptions of places and peoples. Although he praised Posidonius, it is also he is also called, the Greek historian and philosopher who lived from about 135 to 51 BC, for his knowledge of physical geography and ethnography. He rejected Posidonius' theory of climatic zones. You see, as early as these people by 2nd century BC or 1st century BC, they were discussing on the basis of various physical characteristics, that there was a physical geography as well. So that is very important, and he is the one who is talking about climatic zones. Particularly his hypothesis that the equatorial zone was habitable, that near the equator one can inhabit. This critical study led him logically to decide in favor of a descriptive type of geography based on a map with an orthogonal perpendicular projection. The problem of projecting the sphere on a flat surface is not dealt with at any length, because his work, as he said, was designed not for mathematicians but for statesmen, politicians, who must know the countries, their natural resources, the customs of the people one is expected to know about. In book 3 and 3 to 6, Strabo successively described Iberia, Gaul and Italy, for which his main sources were Polybius and Posidonius, both of whom had visited these countries. In addition, he had Artemidorus, a Greek geographer born about 140 BC, and the author of a book describing a voyage around the inhabited earth. around the inhabited earth. So, and that provided him with a description of the coasts and thus of the shape and size of the countries. Book 7 was based on the same authorities and described the Danube basin and the European coasts of the Black Sea, which was up till now not touched by anybody else. So, writing about Greece in book 8 to 10, he still relied upon Artemidorus, but the bulk of his information was taken from two commentators of Homer, Apollodorus of Athens, 2nd century BC, and Demetrius of Sepsis, born about 205 BC. For Strabo, he placed great emphasis on identifying the cities named in the Greek epic Iliad. So, books 11 to 14 describes the Asian shores of the Black Sea and the Caucasus, northern Iran and Asia Minor. Now, when he is visiting Caucasus, he is giving some information about origin of languages, historical linguistics. That point I should have mentioned because he is giving us some idea from where the Aryans might have emerged. So, he is talking about Adronova culture around this place. So, from that point of view also he is very important. Though he often quoted historians who dealt with the wars fought in these regions and cited Demetrius on problems of Homeric topography in the region about ancient Troy, the city. India and Persia he is dealing with in book 15, they were described according to information given by historians of the campaigns of Alexander the Great, 356 to 23 BC. Whereas his descriptions of Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine and the Red Sea, which is covered in book 16, were based on the accounts of the expeditions sent out by Mark Antony about 83 to 30 BC and by the Emperor Augustus as well, as on the chapters on ethnography in Posidonius and on the book of a Red Sea voyage taken by Greek historian and geographer Agatharchides, 2nd century BC. This is a Greek name, so difficult to pronounce. I don't know how correct I am pronouncing. I stand to be corrected, but I have given you the anglicized version. So, Strabo's own memories of Egypt, supplemented by the writings of Posidonius and Artemidorus, provided material for the substance of book 17. Up to 16 I had dealt with, which dealt with the African shores of the Mediterranean Sea and with Mauritania. Obviously, personal travel notes formed only a part of the material, because I was always telling you that from where he is collecting his material. So, material used in this considerable work, although Strabo takes pride, he prided himself on having travelled westward from Armenia as far as the regions of Tuscany, opposite Sardinia, and southward from the Black Sea as far as the frontiers of Ethiopia and Africa. So, you see the vast range of his travel. So, even on the subject of Italy, where he lived for a long time, Strabo did not himself contribute more than a few scattered impressions of him about these places. His material, accordingly, mostly dates from the time of the sources he used, although the reader is not made aware of this. He doesn't mention, but you find that. The value of the first-hand observations chosen from the sources with care compensates, however, for his lack of originality and contemporaneousness. Strabo showed himself equally competent in selecting useful information, for example, giving distances from city to city, mentioning the frontiers between two countries or provinces, as well as the main agricultural, and industrial activities, political, statutes, ethnographic peculiarities of the people, and religious practices. He also took interest in the histories of cities and states, and when he knew them, mentioned the circumstances under which they were founded, related myths or legends, wars they had investigated or endured, their expansion or recession, and their celebrities. So, Strabo also takes trouble of reporting about geological things. Geological phenomena were reported by him when they were in some way which appeared to him unusual, or when they furnished an explanation for the phenomena, such as he is referring to Atlantic tides in Iberia and the volcanic landscapes to be seen in southern Italy. At that time, Italy was facing these things, and Sicily. The foundations of naphtha occurring near the Euphrates river. Naphtha is also called Greek fire. So, and the rise and fall of the Nile waters. These are very accurately given. Paradoxically, although the description of Greece fills 3 whole books, such elements are virtually neglected in them. In this part, indeed, Strabo was more attracted by the problem of identifying the localities mentioned in Homer's works than in geographical realities. These books, however, illustrate another side of his thought, which is very important and should be considered, which are based on the conviction that Homer was perfectly acquainted with the geography of the Mediterranean area, and that the correct critical interpretation would reveal his vast learning. This classical thesis is abundantly defended in Strabo's introduction. If you read the introduction, you will find all these things which I am telling you, which attacks the skepticism of Eratosthenes. Moreover, it represents in Strabo's work the specific contribution to learning of the Greek cultural tradition. Here I would like to briefly mention that there are 2 methods of knowing the dates. The modern dates is BCE, before this era, and CE, Christian era. So, I will be using BC and AD. So, these are this should not lead to any kind of confusion. Both systems are there. So, for my convenience, I always refer to them as BC and AD. This is just as a matter of clarification. Well, friends, now we will be moving towards Roman historiography, of which there are few, but Tacitus is the most important. He was born in 55 AD and died in 120 AD. He was a civil servant, a magistrate in Rome, was the governor of Asia Minor, and he knew Greek and was a contemporary of Plutarch. These are all very important facts. In 1988, Tacitus wrote 2 works. One is known as De Vita Julii Agricolae, and the other is known as The Origin et Situ Germanorum, that is Germania, both reflecting his personal interests. Agricola, the first one, is a biographical account of his father-in-law's career. His name was Agricola, with a special reference to the governorship of Britain, 78 to 84, 6-7 years, and later years under the Domitian. It is laudatory yet circumstantial in its description, and it gives a balanced political judgment, and that is why Tacitus holds importance for us. The Germania is another descriptive piece another work, this time of the Roman frontier on the Rhine, Tacitus emphasizes the simple virtue as well as the primitive vices of the Germanic tribes, because they were tribes, in contrast to the moral laxity of contemporary Rome, and the threat that these tribes, if they acted together, could present to the Roman Gaul. Here, his writing goes beyond the geography or of political ethnography. The work gives an administrator's appreciation of the German situation, I mean the Germanic tribe situation, and to this extent, the work serves as a historical introduction to the Germans. Tacitus still practiced advocacy at law by profession. In 100 AD, he, along with Pliny the Younger, successfully prosecuted Marius Priscus, a proconsul in Africa, for extortion, but he felt that oratory had lost much of its political spirit and its practitioners were deficient in skill. This decline of oratory, which was a high tradition earlier, seems to provide the setting of his dialogue, the Dialogus de Oritribus. The work refers back to his youth, introducing his teachers Aper and Secundus. These two teachers are very important. It has been dated as early as at about 80 AD, chiefly because it is more, Ciceronian in style, written after Cicero's style, than his other writing. But its style arises from its form and subject matter and does not point to an early stage of stylistic development. The date lies between 98 to 102 AD. The theme fits this period. Tacitus compares oratory with poetry as well as of literary life, marking the decline of oratory in public affairs gradually, and the Roman Republic had given scope for true eloquence. The empire limited its inspiration. The work reflects his mood at the time. He turned out to be an orator, from oratory to history. So, there were historians of imperial Rome before Tacitus, notably Aufidius Bassus, who recorded events from the rise of Augustus to the reign of Claudius, and Pliny the Elder, who continued this work, a fine of Aufidius Bassi, to the time of Vespasian. In taking up history, Tacitus joined the line of succession of those who described and interpreted their own period. That is very significant. And he took up the story from the political situation that follows Nero's death to the close of the Flavian dynasty. The histories and the annals. The histories or Historia began at January 1st, 69 AD with Galba in power and proceeded to the death of Domitian in 96 AD. The work contained 12 to 14 books. It is known only that the histories and the annals, both now incomplete, total 30 books. To judge from the younger Pliny's references, several books were ready by 105 AD, the writing advanced by 107, and the work finished by 109 AD. Only books 1 to 4 and part of the book 5 for the year 69-70 AD are extant. They cover the fall of Galba and Piso before Ortho, book 1, Vespasian position in the east and Ortho's suicide make the way for Vitellius, the book 3, Vitellius, that is book 2, book 2, the defeat of Vitellius by the Danubian legions on the Vespasian side, book 3, and the opening of the Vespasian's reign, book 4 and 5. So, up to 5 this book deals with. This text, the text represents a small part of what must have been a brilliant as well as systematic account of the critical Flavian period in Roman history, especially where Tacitus wrote with first-hand knowledge of provincial conditions in the West and of Domitian's last years in Rome. The narrative as it now exists, with its magnificent introduction, is a proverbial, is a powerfully sustained piece of writing, and for all the emphasis and colors of the prose is perfectly appropriate for describing the closing knit set events during the Civil War of 69 AD.